political integration, Join or Die, Benjamin Franklin's 1756 political cartoon urging the colonies to unite in the war against the French and the Indians. The French and the Indians, 1754-1763, was a turning point in the political development of the American colonies. The influence of the two main opponents of the British Crown in the American and Canadian colonies, the French and the North American Indians, was greatly diminished. Furthermore, the war effort resulted in greater political integration among the colonies, as reflected in the Albany Congress and expressed in Benjamin Franklin's call for the colonies to join or die. Franklin was a man of many innovations. His greatest was the concept of a United States of America, which emerged after 1765 and was implemented in July 1776. Following the British acquisition of French territory in North America, King George III issued the Proclamation of 1763, which aimed to organize the new North American Empire and protect the Native Americans from further western expansion by settlers. In the following years, tensions grew between the colonists and the Crown. The British Parliament passed the Stamp Act of 1765, imposing a new tax on the colonies without the consent of the colonial parliaments. The question arose, did the British Parliament have the right to tax the Americans without representation? Crying, "No taxes without representation," the settlers refused to pay the tax as tensions escalated in the late 1760s and early 1770s. 26. 1846 painting depicting the Boston Tea Party of 1773. The Boston Tea Party of 1773 was a direct action by activists in the town of Boston in protest of a new tax on tea. The British Parliament quickly responded the following year with the Intolerable Acts, stripping Massachusetts of its historic autonomy and placing it under military rule. This sparked anger and resistance in all 13 colonies. Patriot leaders from the 13 colonies convened the First Continental Congress to coordinate resistance to the intolerable acts of the British Parliament. The Congress called for a boycott of trade with Britain, published a list of rights and grievances, and petitioned the king for redress. 27. The petition to the king was unsuccessful, and so the Second Continental Congress was convened in 1775 to organize the colony's defense against the British Army. The common people became rebels against the British, although they were unfamiliar with the basic theories of the ideology being taught to them. They had a strong sense of rights that they felt were being deliberately violated by the British: local self-government, equal treatment, and popular government. They were sensitive to the tyranny they had seen when the British Army came to Boston to punish the Bostonians. This increased their sense that their human rights were being violated, leading to resentment and demands for revenge. They believed that God was on their side. 28. The American Revolutionary War began at Concord and Lexington in April 1775, when the British attempted to seize ammunition and arrest Patriot leaders. Population density in the American colonies in 1775. American Revolution. Main article, History of the United States, 1776-1789. George Washington's surprise crossing of the Delaware River in December 1776 was a major reversal of fortunes after the loss of New York City. His army defeated the British in 2 battles and recaptured New Jersey. The 13 colonies began to rebel against British rule in 1775 and declared independence in 1776 as the United States of America. During the American Revolutionary War, 1775-1783, the Americans' capture of the British invasion force at Saratoga in 1777 consolidated the Northeast and encouraged the French to ally themselves with the United States. France drew Spain and the Netherlands into the alliance, thus balancing the armies and navies of each side since Britain had no allies. 29. General George Washington, 1732-1799, proved to be an excellent commander and organizer. He worked successfully with the Continental Congress and the state governors, selected and instructed senior officers, supported and instructed his troops, and maintained an army that was oriented toward the ideals of a republic. His greatest challenge was logistics. As neither the Continental Congress nor the states had the funds to provide adequate equipment, ammunition, medical care, pay, or even food for his troops, as a field tactician, Washington was often outnumbered by his British counterparts. As a strategist, he had better ideas about how to win. The British sent 4 invasion armies. Washington's strategy forced the First Army out of Boston in 1776 and the Second and Third Armies to surrender at Saratoga 1777 and Yorktown 1781. He limited British control to New York City and a few other places, while the Patriots controlled much of the population, 30. The Loyalists, whom the British relied on so heavily, made up about 20% of the population, but were never well organized. When the war ended, Washington watched with pride as the last British army quietly sailed out of New York City in November 1783, taking the Loyalist leadership with them. Washington stunned the world when, rather than seize power for himself, he quietly retired to his farm in Virginia. Political scientist Seymour Martin Lipset observed that the United States was the first major colony to successfully resist colonial rule. In this sense, it was the first new nation. 31. John Trumbull's declaratory painting of independence. On July 4, 1776, the Second Continental Congress, meeting in Philadelphia, declared the independence of the United States of America with the Declaration of Independence. July 4th is celebrated as a national holiday. The new nation was founded on the liberal ideals of enlightenment, which Thomas Jefferson called the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and it was strongly devoted to Republican principles. Republicanism emphasized the sovereignty of the people, rather than hereditary monarchs, demanded citizenship, shunned corruption, and rejected aristocracy. National religion. The American Revolution was the primary impetus for the non-denominational American national religion that has shaped patriotism, memory, and the nation's birth ever since. Battles were not the focus, but rather events and people were celebrated as symbols of certain faiths. As historians have noted, the American Revolution produced a leader like Moses, George Washington, prophets Thomas Jefferson, Tom Paine, and martyrs, Boston Massacre, Nathan Hale, as well as demons, Benedict Arnold, sacred places, Valley Forge, Bunker Hill, doctrines, the Boston Tea Party, symbols, the new flag, holy days, the 4th of July, and a Bible whose every verse was carefully studied and applied to contemporary legal cases, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. 33. The early years of the Republic. Economic growth in the United States per capita, index for 1700 is set at 100, Articles of Confederation, and the Constitution. See also, Articles of Confederation. In the 1780s, the national government was able to settle the issue of the Western territories, which were ceded by the states to the United States. Congress and became territories. As settlers moved into the Northwest, now the Midwest, these territories soon became states. Nationalists feared that the new nation was too weak to withstand an international war or even internal rebellions, such as Shays's Rebellion in Massachusetts in 1786. Nationalists, mostly veterans, organized in every state and convinced Congress to convene the Philadelphia Convention in 1787. Delegates from each state wrote a new constitution that established a much stronger and more effective central government. This government had a strong president and the power to collect taxes. The new government reflected prevailing Republican ideas, guaranteeing individual liberty and restraining government power through a system of separation of powers. 34. Congress was given the power to ban the international slave trade after 20 years, implemented in 1807. The Southern electoral votes were increased by counting 3/5 of the number of slaves in each state's population. As slavery expanded in the South over the following decades, this increased the political power of Southern representatives in the United States Congress. To allay anti-federalists' fears of an overly powerful federal government, the nation passed the United States Bill of Rights in 1791. The act included the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, guaranteeing individual liberties such as freedom of speech, freedom of religion, trial by jury, and stating that citizens and states had the right to reservations, but did not specify what these rights were. Leading the new executive, George Washington, a celebrated hero of the American Revolutionary War, commander-in-chief of the Continental Army, and president of the Constitutional Convention, became the first president of the United States under the new Constitution in 1789. The national capital moved from New York to Philadelphia and finally to Washington, D.C. in 1800. The great achievements of George Washington's administration were to create a strong national government that was recognized by all Americans without question. 36. His administration, under the energetic leadership of Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton, assumed the debts of the states. The lenders then received federal bonds, established the Bank of the United States to balance the financial system, and established a uniform system of tariffs, import duties, and other taxes to pay off the debt and provide a financial infrastructure. To support his programs, Hamilton founded a new political party, the world's first voter-based party, the Federalist Party. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison founded an opposing Republican Party, often referred to by political scientists as the Democratic Republican Party. Hamilton and Washington presented the nation with the Jay Treaty of 1794, re-establishing friendly relations with Great Britain. The Jeffersonians were vehemently opposed, and voters voted along party lines, thus creating the first party system. The Federalists promoted commerce, finance, and commercial interests and wanted more trade with Great Britain. The Republicans accused the Federalists of planning to establish a monarchy, turn the wealthy into a ruling class, and turn the United States into a pawn of Great Britain. The treaty was ratified, but the political situation became increasingly heated. 38. The Whiskey Rebellion of 1794, when settlers in the West, now the Midwest, protested against a federal tax on liquor, was the first serious challenge to the federal government. Washington called out state militias to suppress the rebellion and personally led the troops as the rebellion gradually died down and the authority of the national government was firmly established. 39. Washington refused to serve more than 2 terms, setting a precedent for future presidents, and in his famous farewell address, he extolled the benefits of the federal government and the importance of morality, while warning against foreign alliances and the formation of political parties. 40. John Adams, a Federalist, defeated Jefferson in the presidential election of 1796. War with France was imminent, and the Federalists used this opportunity to silence the Republicans with the Alien and Sedition Acts, build a large army with Hamilton at its head, and prepare for a French invasion. However, the Federalists became divided after Adams sent a successful peace mission to France to end the war in 1798. 37. Slavery. In the first 2 decades after the American Revolution, there were major changes in the status of slavery among the states, and an increase in the number of free blacks. Inspired by revolutionary ideas of human equality and less economic dependence on slavery, northern states abolished slavery, although some states gradually emancipated slaves. The Upper South states made it easier to emancipate slaves, resulting in an increase in the percentage of free blacks in the Upper South from less than 1% in 1792 to over 10% in 1810. At that time, a total of 13.5% of the total black population in the United States was free, 42. After that time, as the demand for slaves increased and cotton cultivation expanded in the Deep South, the rate of emancipation slowed rapidly. The domestic slave trade became an important source of wealth for many planters and merchants